will be some bits that we could improve in the future. But if I just briefly tell you what we're trying to achieve, then you can tell us at the end whether we've achieved it. We get over 200 entries every year for the Tech4Good Awards. The point of today's session is to provide you with some top tips and feedback from past winners and judges before you put your entry in, just to make sure that you've got the best possible chance of winning and giving us the information that we need. There's plenty of chance for you to ask questions as we go along. Please do use the Q&A panel, and I'll try and keep tabs on that when you're hearing from somebody. And there's also a chance to ask questions afterwards. You'd be welcome to email us once you've seen the presentation. You may still have questions. We're always welcome. We always welcome people contacting us before they put their entries in. So I've got a few slides prepared. What we're going to go through today is we're going to tell you a bit about the awards, just to clarify some of the details. We're going to talk about the categories. There'll be some information about the criteria. We're not going to go through the criteria in great detail, but just to show you where they are and tell you what our intention is with the criteria. And then finally, to tell you a bit about the judging process, at which time you'll be able to hear from some of the judges. And along the way, we've got Sarra here from Small Robot Company, who was one of the winners from last year. And I'm going to introduce her shortly and get her take on how to win and what they did that they think that they got right when they entered, just to give you some top tips. So I'm going to start with a poll, not least just to make sure that the software is working, but the first question is, have you ever entered the Tech4Good Awards? So hopefully you can see on the screen a poll that says, have you ever you can't because I haven't launched it. I have now. Have you ever answered? Have you ever entered? Just want to check in where you're at in terms of your knowledge of the Tech4Good Awards, so that I don't tell you a load of stuff you already know. It's looking about 80-20 at the moment. Got about 30 people on the call. So I've got, what have I got here? Yeah, 75-25%. 75% of you haven't entered before. If I just end the poll, I'll share that with you. You'll see that 14 of you have entered and 14 haven't and 4 have. Just to let you know, we had about 80 people sign up for the webinar, but in most cases when we do webinars like this, we know the majority of people will watch this afterwards. But I will lean towards assuming that you haven't entered before and that therefore you just want some basic information, which we'll try not to miss out. I've got another poll as well. I just wondered what type of organization you're from. And how do I start that next poll? Here we go. What type of organization are you from? So that we get a sense of whether you're a charity, a business, social enterprise, volunteer, other. If you are other, if that doesn't seem to fit, can you just use the Q&A box just to let me know in case there's something. Someone's asking about the subtitles. They're actually designed to be a feature, and I can only switch them off for everybody. If they're not very helpful, then do let us know. There is something that we've added. Zoom, the software, has it built in, and we have added it. They, I think, are doing okay at the moment. But yes, just to let you know, that's added as part of the whole webinar. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. You'll see that there's a nice even split between charities, businesses, and social enterprises, 5 of each. One person is a volunteer. And so that means I'll also, again, just assume that you come from any one of those rather than one in particular. There may be parts of the way we talk that will be more relevant to some than others. I can also see that we've been joined by Gareth. Hi, Gareth.
Hello. Hi, Gareth.
So Gareth is one of our judges. He's going to be talking in a moment as well. So let's get going. There are going to be 4 of us talking. Myself, Sarra from Small Robot Company, not the Root Company, the Robot Company, my apologies. Gareth Ford-Williams and John Pratty will come in a second to the relevant roles. I just want to also say thank you. As part of the Tech4Good Awards, we've got a bigger group of sponsors and partners than ever before. Some great people helping us out, some providing funding, some providing expertise, everybody providing support in broadly in terms of raising the profile of the awards. Brandwatch, BT, Charity Digital News, Comic Relief, Crowdfunder, Do It Life, Good Things Foundation. information technologies company, Lloyds Banking Group, Microsoft, ReciteMe, Samsung, Scope, and Unlimited. So a huge thank you to them, and also give you a sense of the scale and breadth of people involved in Tech4Good Awards this year. Quick outline of the schedule. Your nominations have to be in, your entries have to be in by the 10th of May. We then do shortlisting. We aim to have all the shortlists made by the 17th of May and shared around to our judges. So every category will have a shortlist of 3 or 4 entries, and then the judges will choose the winners in every category. So John and Gareth will see all the entries in the shortlists in every category. And there's a group of about 23 judges, I think, this year that will be involved in that process. So they'll make their decision on the 11th of June when there's a networking event for all the finalists. So everybody who's shortlisted will be invited to BT Tower on the 11th of June. You'll meet all the other finalists, which is great in terms of networking. You'll also meet some of the judges, and you'll have a chance to have lots of speed networking and other activities like that, and then lunch at the top of the tower. And in the afternoon, the judges will get together and make their decisions. You won't find out the results of that until the awards ceremony on the 17th of July, but you'll have plenty to get on with because there'll be a People's Award vote during June, July. And you'll be given a crowdfunding page and asked to think about your next big step. What support do you need to get to your next big step as a project? And I'll refer to that again when we're talking about entries, because I think this is a great way to make yourself stand out in the when filling in your nomination. So we're asking people to tell us what will help you get further and increase the impact of what you're doing. You'll post that up onto a crowdfunding page. People can vote for you just by liking it. They can make an offer of funding. You could be asked for money or resources, or you could be looking for a partner to do a particular sort of technology step in your process. We're really interested in how the crowdfunding will open up for you the chance to raise your profile and but also help you continue to develop your project. The awards ceremony is on the 17th of July at BT Centre in St Paul's in London. And we have already lined up a Winners' Day on the 2nd of October, and this is all part of the process of giving you more support. So our winners will all be invited to an event in London to meet a lot of our sponsors and a lot of other partners that we've worked with to help you look again at your next big step and see how we can help you develop. So a thread running through this really is we want to know where you're at now, but we also want to know where you could get to next. And that very much is part of the application process as well. Why would you want to win? One reason, because we're going to give you some old computer stuff wrapped up and made to look like a trophy, which always look cool and people really love those. If you haven't seen them before, they're a big part of what we do is make the trophies stand out. But it's good for you to raise your profile. It's good for you to connect with other people. It's good for you to celebrate your hard work. There'll be a lot of people you want to say thank you to. If you are doing an amazing piece of work, there could be funders, it could be volunteers, it could be your staff, it could be your client group. But in particular for us, really looking at your next big step. If this is a great profile raising exercise for you, what can you actually achieve on the back of this? Where can you go next? What do you need to get there, and how can we help you achieve that? So again, bear that in mind. That's a really core part of how we're trying to help you, and I think part of the application process is seeing where that potential could be. There are 9 categories that you can enter yourself. I will very briefly tell you how they stand out, but the criteria, we'll come to that in a second, are different for each. The Accessibility Award is about technology that helps disabled people. Aging Society Award is about the ways that we're going to deal with and manage the changes in society as broadly the community gets older. Community Impact Award is about a particular community of interest or geographical community and how technology is supporting them and helping improve their lives. Connected Society Award is generally around innovation and technology that brings us closer together and helps us communicate as communities. Diversity Award is using tech to promote and develop diversity across workplace and across society as a whole. The Inclusive Design Award is looking at the processes that you're using to build the technologies that you are. How are you involving your users in this process? Really celebrating the people who are putting the users right at the core of their decision making and using them as a key part of the design process. Tech4Good for Africa Award is primarily looking at sub-Saharan Africa, but also more broadly Africa at large. How is technology helping to improve the lives of people in all sorts of ways across the continent? We do that in conjunction with Comic Relief, who have a lot of projects that they're developing and supporting in Africa, and so it's a great way of celebrating and sharing knowledge from that continent. The Volunteer of the Year will be somebody providing an amazing level of personal input to a charity or some other not-for-profit setting where they're really making a difference on an individual basis. And the Young Pioneer Award is the under 18 community doing things either in a school as a group or as an individual in all sorts of settings. And if you look back over the years, there's just been some amazing stories of young people doing really cool stuff. Finally, there are 3 categories that you can't enter at this stage, but are relevant in terms of when we announce the winners. So the Tech4Good People's Award, you will be entered in that when you're a finalist, and you will have a chance to use our crowdfunding services to build support for your work, and we will announce a winner on the basis of the most popular entry in that category. The Tech4Good Special Award, we always announce one person who the panel of judges have chosen as an inspirational figure. Past winners have been Dame Steve Shirley. We had Lewis Hine last year, a young man who's made some amazing software for helping children who are too ill to attend school to join a community. And then on the day, we have a winner of Winners Award, a chance for everybody in the audience to choose their favourite using glow sticks. And if you haven't ever seen that, then that's a good enough reason to try and get to the award ceremony on its own. You can go to the website now, as I hope you know, and enter. All of the entry forms are online. You start filling them in. You can return to them and continue to fill them in later. I won't dwell on that. They're hopefully self-explanatory. If you have any problems with forms, just let me know. But within the forms, you'll find the criteria for each category. So as you enter, it will tell you what we're looking for. What we're going to talk about today is the more general approach to how you fill in the applications and some things to focus on. So, Sarah, we're going to come to you first because I'd like to know a little bit more about what you do. And if you could tell us what Small Robot Company does, that, and then a little bit about your entry last year. You know, how did it feel this time last year when you were contemplating putting your application in?
Yes, okay, so Small Robot Company, as it says on the tin, we're making small robots, and what we're doing is it's small farming robots, so they're small compared to tractors rather than being nano small. We are looking to transform farming, making it sustainable, so we can remove up to 95% of the chemicals and up to 90% of the emissions associated with arable farming, which has a huge impact on the environment. Apart from that, because it's much more efficient and productive, it's also great for farmers. So from a commercial perspective, this is an idea that a lot of farmers have been interested in. But obviously from our point of view, it was very important to us as an ethos that there was a social purpose attached to it, both from the sort of founding principles and vision point of view, but also for our team. So when we heard about the Tech4Good Awards, we really, really wanted to enter, and you know, we felt it was kind of, I guess, a validation for us when we won that what we're doing isn't just something that's going to help farmers with their businesses and make a profit and so on, but actually it's going to have a huge impact, essentially for the planet as a whole, by really improving the environmental impact of farming. So this time last year, we were still very early stage. We just won a grant from the Institute of Engineering and Technology to develop the technology. But that wasn't enough for us to make our first robot with. We needed additional funding. And we were just starting the process of a crowdfunding campaign when around about time when we heard about our Tech4Good win. And so it was just brilliant for us. I mean, like, it really helped create, I guess, a halo aura around us, you know, to really show the benefits of what we're trying to do for the wider planet as well as just for the farmers. So that was just very, very timely for us. I mean, you know, we would have entered in any case, but it really was really great timing that it coincided with our crowdfunding campaign and really helped it take off. So I think it's fantastic that they've added this new dimension to the award this year and made it more organic within the award. Hopefully, whoever wins this year will find that it has a kind of transformative impact for them as well. This kind of ability to kind of have a think about where you're going next, what's the next step, how can people help you, which certainly has been something that Tech4Good has helped us with. So coming back to the award entry itself, I think the key thing is to really think hard about what your story is. What impact will you have? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is your solution? And tell the story. So make it personal. Think about the human impact. What's different and innovative about what you're doing? How can you make yourself stand out? Make it very punchy and readable, and make every word work for you. I think go through it and then give it to somebody who didn't write it, and make sure it makes sense to them. Make sure that anything superfluous is trimmed out, because I'm sure there'll be more to your story that you can add in if you manage to cut the bits that perhaps don't add such impact out from it. Just think very, very clearly, like what is, if you were, what's the elevator pitch? If there was one thing you were going to say to somebody about what you're doing, what is that one thing? And lead with that, and then add in the evidence. Have you got any data to support it? Why is the problem that you're trying to solve important? Is there anything, any bigger picture data that can perhaps explain why it's important? Or it might be that your founding story has a personal story, perhaps. As many of these awards do, there might be something very personal to you which has really driven you, motivated you, inspired you, and that will then be a core part of your story. Does that cover enough detail, Mark? Or would you like to
absolutely
add more to that?
I think that's really helpful, and I think the things you've picked up on are very helpful to think about the impact. It's also worth saying, if you haven't looked at the forms yet, that we've deliberately restricted the amount of words that you can use. So we really are looking for, you mentioned this, that Sarah, we're looking for less, not more. We don't need endless reams of information. We want to know the most relevant, direct points. The judges will be given a set of shortlists, which when printed out would be about 60 pages, 70 pages. So you really want to pick out the most important details. You really want to focus on the core value of what you're doing. And then the other part that you've mentioned in there is looking at the numbers, looking at the data, which supports both to identify the problem. You may not necessarily be having a huge impact in terms of large numbers, but you may well be trying to tackle a problem that is widespread and needs some innovative solutions. So both looking at the scale of what it is you're tackling and looking at which in your case, food across the planet, broadly, food production across the planet. Yeah. That's not a bad place to start. But clearly, in terms of where you're starting, is not necessarily to fix all of that in one go. But it does give a sense of scale of what you're trying to achieve and how it's part of a bigger picture. So that certainly caught my eye. I remember seeing your entry come in and thinking, well, if you're part of that huge problem-solving process, then whatever you're doing now, is going to be a good thing. And then equally, the impact that you're having right now in terms of change and focus was manageable and achievable, and obviously pointed in the right direction in terms of sustainability and commercial value as well. So it's both ends of that scale, I think, for people looking at what they're doing now. Don't just dive into what you are doing about it, but also try to help us understand the problems that you're trying to address. I don't know if you know how much time you set aside for it, Sarah. Do you have any recollection of how long it took you to fill it in?
The award.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
It was a good morning. But I didn't. I did some Sarra Mander work before as well. So It was kind of, I guess, a 3-step process. We sat down as a team and talked about what we were trying to do, pulled out some key points. Then I went and did some research into, what I have to back our story up. And then finally sat down and wrote it, and then, as I said, kind of went through it with a fine-tooth comb and edited it. So initially we were over the word count. It's like, okay, what are we going to keep? What are we going to trim? What are we going to emphasize? What are we going to move up? What are we going to move down? And did a really harsh edit to it as well.
Great. Well, I think that's exemplary, and I think it showed in the quality of the application that, you know, a little bit of research beforehand, sitting down and having a go in it, but also getting other people involved will always help. Sense check it. I've got 5 points here which have been passed on from I think there's a few judges who've been involved since the very start. This is the 9th year, but I think you've picked out a few of those things in there. The first is brevity. We will be reading a huge number of applications, and yours needs to stand out straight away rather than being the longest. It needs to be the clearest, and the shortest would be the big tick. Use facts to tell us about what you're trying to do, the impact it could have, as well as the impact it is having. When you're thinking about impact, it's both quantitative and qualitative. You know, you're changing people's lives. Are you developing a new piece of technology? Are you adding another piece to a jigsaw that other people are working on? What evidence do you have? Do you have feedback from users? Do you have links that you can take us to online which show your work in action? Evidence here, as well as story, very often could be video, and we do invite you to link to videos, and I know that the videos get watched. And very often that's an easy way of pulling together, you know, the real people who are being impacted and the stories that they're telling you about the impact you're having. So I think that, you know, a good quality entry will be thinking about these things at all times. So over to the hot seats, the hottest seats, the judges. Briefly, John, could you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. Am I coming through fine?
Yes, you are.
I think I've managed to unmute myself finally. Right, John. I am John Pratty. I'm I guess a very experienced digital publisher, journalist, science and technology journalist. I have a day job and a kind of job I do for inspiration and passion. My passion job, my inspiration job is I'm the chair of the National Disabled Arts Collection and Archive, NDACA CIC, which is basically a kind of the beginnings of an archive which and a collection which pulls together some of the best and most interesting and historic work done by artists, disabled artists, over the last 50 years or so from all across Britain. So, chair of NDACA CIC, something I very much believe in as an artist, an arts administrator and leader. I also do a lot of work across kind of social space, the community space and the participatory space. I'm currently, and this is a bit of a revelation, I guess, currently taking over my town Wi-Fi for social, cultural and community good. And more will come out about that when we finally sign the lease with the council, name of which and location of which I probably shouldn't reveal yet. And finally, my day job, I'm a content and marketing strategist with a Middle Eastern company, and I go to Beirut quite a lot, which is really quite different from all of this. I've been working, I've been judging Tech4Good Awards for 3 years.
I think so. I think this is
3 years. And I've been doing lots and lots of web judging. I'm a very experienced judge of web awards. I've been judging the Museums of the Web Awards for the last 12 or 13 years in the US. So looking at lots of culture websites. And I'm personally very excited about one day there might be a Tech4Good Awards Arts and Culture Award, which Mark and I talk about a lot. Anyway, that's me.
Cool. Thank you, John. Well, hopefully for a start, everybody listening will realise just how broad the, if you imagine talking to John about your project, you can see how broad his interest would be. Gareth, tell us a bit about your role at the BBC and similarly sort of what it is that catches your eye in the judging process.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'm Gareth Ford-Williams. Been at the BBC about 16 years, and 14 years ago I set up the accessibility team here, and a few years later on after that set up the usability or design research team, as it's now called. And somewhere in the middle of that spent 2 years as part of the team that built the platform that's now called UView, and did all the accessibility work in that. So yeah, quite a lot of accessibility stuff in there from me. So I'm now a head of user experience design at BBC. Couple of things to know about me. I have ADHD and dyslexia. So please, yeah, I hold my attention and make it really, really easy to read. Clear and simple language. I mean, I don't mind, a bit of jargon is really, really good, but if you have to use it, give us some resources where we can find out some background about, what the thing is that you're talking about, if there is something technical in there. Weirdly enough, I've just discovered something about John that I didn't know, which is brilliant. So my background's fine arts. I'm actually a painter. That's what I did my degree in. So you and I are going to have a conversation next time we meet up.
Fantastic.
That's fascinating. But yeah, that's sort of my passion outside of work. Really is fine art. And but when it comes to your entries, I mean, there's so many. Catherine actually covered nearly everything that I wanted to say in there, and obviously within the 5 tips, that was so useful. I mean, it's really telling the story is the main thing. Everyone, all of the entries, there's a story in there, and sometimes trying to tease it out becomes quite problematic. And if you don't understand the story, it's quite difficult to judge it accurately. So please, if you've got passion for the thing that you're doing, let that come through in your entry. Please describe what the gap is, the problem is that you're solving. Again, if we really can get our head around the context of the problem, and even if it's a novel way of approaching a existing problem which ends up moving the thing on a little bit further, really make sure that we understand that. Now, the nice thing about the judging panel is there's a huge breadth of skills and expertise in that judging panel, but please don't depend on that breadth because sometimes things come up and there's 1 or 2 people in the room that go, I know a bit about this, and they help educate the rest of the judges, and it helps the discussion move on. But it shouldn't, try not to depend on that, that being present. And give us a bit of data. If there are numbers, if there is impact in here, or if there is an increasing problem, bring it to life. Sometimes numbers are incredibly useful. Obviously, keep them very, very high level. But show trends and show issues and show improvements, etc., and give us some hard data, give some evidence to back the story. Even sometimes, the evidence can be anecdotal. If there's some other people's stories, the stories of the people that have been impacted come back through, incredibly useful for us. And really, sometimes just patronize us a little. If you feel like, I wouldn't want to put that in because maybe that's a little bit too straightforward, please put it in sometimes, because it sometimes helps us to make sure that we are interpreting what you're saying in the way that you want it interpreted. But I think that's about it. I mean, everything really was in what Catherine said already. Which was bang on.
Sorry, you mean Sarra? Just to correct you. You mean,
was it
Sarra from Small Robot Company?
Idiot.
She probably pops up as Catherine on your list. That's probably what it is. You see,
this is right. Oh, it's Catherine. Oh, I know Catherine. Sorry, Catherine. Sorry, Sarra.
That's okay, Gareth.
So
no worries.
I've got a couple of questions for you in terms of each of you. John first. How long do you take to read each entry, do you think? How much time are you able to dedicate to each as a rough estimate?
I take quite a lot of time. I go through the form that I've been sent, line by line. If a URL has been sent, I'll look at the URL. I'll scroll through the content and the background evidence. I'll look at videos. How long does it take? I mean, it might take half an hour sometimes to look at an entry properly. Sometimes there have been forms or nominations which require us as judges to kind of really read into it quite a lot. And so you do try as a judge to reach across a little bit more than you might do. And I think that's important. So you use your experience to read between the lines a bit, and sometimes this takes a bit of time. But that's what being a judge is all about. You try to be systematic, but at the same time, you use your experience to catch things that you think the nomination includes, but which which may not have been quite as explicit as it could be.
Great, thank you. And Gareth, have you got a sense of? I mean, is it a quick process, or is it an hour long? As there's somewhere in between, presumably.
I start out with a goodwill to actually have a structured process around this, but with most things, when you're ADHD, it all goes out the window within seconds. I find myself sometimes, I find something fascinating, and I can spend, it then turns into something I start reading more and more around the subject. And I think sometimes it depends on, the amount of time I spend is how much your imagination is captured by the entry. Someone brings something to life that you just think, I've never even thought about that before, and I want to know more. And you end up spending more time on those where you get a passion from the way it's written. But yeah, I again, as John said, you give it as much time as you think to properly understand and be fair. So I do as much reading around it. I try and probably visit them. I go back a couple of times at least and reread through it and rethink about it. Because sometimes it's one of those things, going back, you take like 10, 20% of whatever of understanding away from it. You go back and you go, I did, and draw something else out of it again, and then go back and draw again. And just to the point where I feel like I'm actually confident, or as confident as I can be, to bring an informed sort of opinion to the room when we all get together. And that's when the fun starts, doesn't it, Mark? When all the judges meet.
Yeah, so the reason we're grinning is because there's often a heated debate, and it's rare that Gareth isn't involved in it. But John, I was going to ask you, in terms of your experience at other awards, is there something about the Tech4Good Awards that you're looking for? You think is the sort of the essence of what makes a strong application or a winner? How do you capture that if you're thinking about what you're looking for?
Right, that's the hardest question so far, Mark.
I know. You can have your question in a minute, but
I think that I actually want to pick up something Gareth said really quickly first, but I will get back to that. First, when you've got 10 nominations to read, say, I mean, I look at them in groups. So I try to go through them, and I try to give them an appropriate amount of time each. So sometimes it means looking through very quickly all of them and then coming back to them again, so that you begin to pick out the salient ones that really, really stand out, which is edging back towards answering your first question, Mark. So I think that there is an approach which is all about how you judge and how you concentrate and how you train your expertise and your judging skills. So it's all about having a method. Having said that, there are applications and nominations that stand out, and for me they tend to be. I think that you spot the ones that are really original and innovative and unusual the most easily. But as a judge, it's also your job to look beyond the most obvious and most dynamic nominations and look for things which are a little bit more prosaic. Sometimes they're more deeper lying messages or deeper lying projects that might actually come to fruition a little bit longer into the future than something which is really good, really attractive, easily deliverable, and which will come to fruition quite quickly. And sometimes it's actually about balancing the really good, easy to deliver, attractive nominations and the nominations which might fail and might be more about R&D, but ones which have a real topicality and a longer distance importance to them. Come back at me with the question again, Mark. Ask me again.
No, I think it's a question about what is it that's a Tech4Good winner here? That, I mean, because you look at other categories, you look at other awards, and so the answer I would give when asked about it is it's about the outcome, not the technology.
Absolutely, yeah. And
that's what you mean about the prosaic bit, I think, isn't it?
I think that we're always looking for things which will go through and have a deeper lying societal or community impact. And across the different awards, that might come in different speeds and different velocities and in different ways. The comic relief Africa Awards is a really good example of that. Sometimes those awards are much harder and much more complex and take a little bit longer to come to fruition for geographical reasons. And then looking across at the Accessibility Award, I'm mad about accessibility too, Gary. I think this is something I think we need to be much more passionate about, particularly across the commercial sector, commercial web sector, where accessibility in some, particularly in the third sector, just actually seems to be dropping away as a concern. So for me, I think these awards are an opportunity to look deeper, think about people, and the other awards I judge are often not about this kind of thing. So it's a joy to take part in the awards scheme.
Thank you. Anything to add, Gareth, there about what it is, is there an easy way of just capturing that spirit of Tech for Good that you think, hey, here's a good one, no matter how well it's written or otherwise, I guess?
Well, on a practical level, is just make sure that you read the criteria. Yeah, we have had some things when you sat down and gone, you've not answered it in sense. All of the judging is done. There is a set of criteria against it, and we start with that and then build on top of that. And if you haven't got a foundation of meeting or answering the criteria or putting in context the criteria, it becomes quite difficult. But I think from a personal point of view, it's, I like to have my imagination captured by these things. I like to see things that I've, and learn from the actual entries. When you've read something, you go, I just feel like my worldview has expanded a little bit and my faith in humanity has been restored a little bit more. And, you want to, as a judge, come away from this. And it is good. I mean, every year it happens and you find a few things in there that just catch you, and you're just like, this is amazing that this is happening in the world, and this is brilliant. And that's what you want. You want to get that kind of sense of it. Be surprised, but even sometimes the simplest things, the fundamental things, the things that people overlook, can have the biggest impacts. But then bring that to story bring that to life in the story that you tell. But I think, I just want to read an entry and feel good about the world at the end of it, and being just impressed and I mean in awe of so many of the people that enter these things every year. Absolutely in awe of it. It's great.
I think actually what you've made me think there as well, I can think of examples where it feels like sometimes the entry is about the organization that's entered it rather than about what they're trying to do and how they're going about it. The difficulties the organization has overcome are interesting, but actually the story is really about, we saw this problem and we set about trying to fix it, and here's what we did about it, and here's what some people said about what we did. And I think the weakest entries are often talking about themselves more than about the problem and the way they're solving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can see that coming through quite quickly. We do ask a question quite early on, why should you win? And that's not about why you should win. It's about why your idea is a really good idea and why we should support it, really. Not your organization and the particular position you're in, but why this is a great idea and why it needs the attention we can give it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you've said that very clearly there about, capture my imagination, make me think about how this problem will help change the world.
I want to go down the pub and tell people about the things that I've read.
Yeah.
Going, there's a thing that I saw today. You wouldn't believe what this organisation's doing, and you want to pass it on.
Yeah,
and that's when you've read a good entry.
I think as well, just to be clear, what we don't mean there is that the tech is really shiny and amazing. Equally,
yeah.
I remember one of the things when the first time we got an entry from somebody who was working in prisons and put some really amazing detail behind the lives of prisoners and how difficult it is for prisoners to move on when they leave prison. And that was the initial sort of pitch. It was a setup, and then the way in which they were helping them with technology to make them more ready for the outside world and to survive and thrive when they left prison. That was broadly the story. And I hadn't thought about that at all before, and really brought it to life. And the technology in it, I think, was iPads. I don't think it was anything cleverer than that particularly.
Yeah.
It was just they were putting some really interesting stuff together. So, Sarra, I think you're still there. I just wondered if you had any other final comments to make on the back of what you've heard from these two.
Yes, so I'm just actually reading through my entry again, actually, and I think, yes, that focus on the bigger picture and the impact and the vision is coming through very clearly, actually, in what I wrote. It was very much less about us and more about why we felt it was absolutely vital for us to instrument these changes and what we thought the impact could be. And remember, we were still really quite early stage when I did this entry. We had one very fledgling prototype robot that didn't really do that much, and we were trying to build our proof of concept robot, and we you know, that was where we were. So we had made some significant progress, which I did outline, but really it was a lot of it was about what we were aspiring to do and our vision and the steps that it would take to get there, and how, you know, we were very clear and still are about what we need to do, what the challenges are. And I mean, it's a huge undertaking that's in front of us. I mean, like, it's incredibly ambitious to kind of say, right, we're going to change farming forever. You know, but we're going to try, and we believe that we must try. And I think probably that passion and that ambition did come across very clearly in what I've written.
Brilliant, thank you. So I don't know, we've had a couple of questions coming along, and some of them have been answered. If anybody does have questions, now's the time to use the Q&A. Let us know if there's anything you want to ask John or Gareth or Sarah in terms of your thinking about your entry. Just to go back over the ground that we've covered, that Gareth mentioned the criteria. When you fill in the form, when you land on the page, there are some outlined criteria there in bullet points. And as you fill in the form, you should be answering those points as clearly as possible. We've kept it simple, so hopefully you don't need to sort of worry too much about it. The 3 or 4 bullet points for each of them is essentially the criteria. But deviating from that means you're sort of weaving away from where the judges want to hear. And the more detail you add, the more data and numbers in particular, the easier it is for our judges to pick out that you are at least focused on those criteria and understand what we're looking for. So that all comes from the entry form, and entry forms all have different criteria. So the questions you're being asked will broadly be the same. The answers need to fit into those criteria that we're looking for in a particular category. Okay, so one last chance to ask any questions, if anybody has any. And if not, then I'm just going to launch a poll. I'm interested in whether what we've done is persuade you to enter. Will you be entering as a yes, no, or not sure? If you could just let us know.
As a previous winner, I have to say, do enter. It's amazing. I'm still so proud that we won. It's just been brilliant for us.
Great, thank you. Well, I mean, I'm hoping that by the time you get to this point in the webinar that you think it might be worth entering and that you want to impress John and Gareth and all our other judges. But equally, if there are any reasons why you're not sure, please do let us know. I think the part of this is just making sure that we understand how to make the process as accessible as possible for people who are interested in entering. We don't want to feel like what John and Gareth has said sets the bar in terms of the actual idea you're working on. This is much more about how clearly you share that idea and enable us to understand what is special about what you're doing. I've got a good question here. Can one person enter more than one category? Yes, they can. The other subtle difference is that if we spot something in one category that isn't likely to win that category, we do look for winners in other categories. So when we're doing the shortlisting, they're not evenly distributed across all the categories. You may have entered community impact. You may be in a strong field of entrants that are in a similar category, but you may well have entered something which could really shine in the Aging Society Award, for example, and we will look at whether or not we can move across. We'll contact you about that. But you can definitely enter more than one category. The categories have slightly different criteria, so you do need to be careful that you're answering the questions correctly. You can't just cut and paste across those categories. What weight is applied in judging to social value and social impact? I would say my first instinct would be that you definitely won't win if you aren't clear about the social value and social impact you're having. We want to know what you think you're doing that has social value and social impact. I would say when you're looking at a category In some areas, it's something like the community impact is all about trying to judge the impact you're having. It may be a small community that you're working with having a big impact. It may be a large community where you're having a smaller impact. So you may just need to consider, as a judge, you're considering how you weigh that up. And the social value, underlying everything we're doing here is the social good of the way in which tech can help make the world a better place. So you do need to be very clear about what you think the social value is you're bringing. And the clarity you offer is really both about the nature of the change you're trying to fulfill, and also some numbers so that we understand the value that you're adding to the problem you're solving. Any other questions?
I can see a good one on the chat line there, Mark.
Oh yes, here we are.
It's actually quite a brilliant question. So this is it better to nominate yourself or to be nominated? So there must be a little bit of back-end comment you can add to that, Mark. If someone nominates you and you haven't self-nominated, would you get in touch with the organisation that has been nominated and let them know? Do they then put their own nomination in?
Yeah, so that's great question. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong classic one. I was looking at the questions and answers, not the chat. If you do have questions on either, put them on either one, because I can see another one in there now as well. If somebody nominates you, we ask them to tick a box that says this isn't me I'm nominating, it's someone else. We will then contact the person who's been entered. It doesn't make it more or less likely that you are going to win. It just, in a lot of cases, it means that you'll have a better entry if you get to fill it in yourself, because the person filling in the entry on your behalf either does or doesn't know exactly what you do and what you're trying to achieve. A lot of the nominated entries we get are fairly basic. I think this should win. It's a really great thing. It inspired me. I wish there was more of it. It's really cool. But the story behind it is actually, how did you get that idea together? Where's it going next? How much work has it taken? What do you think you could be doing to improve and grow the impact? Well, that can only come from the organisation that's being nominated, really. So that's the sort of difference you can often see when you do go back in to talk to the organisation. Just a colouring in a lot of the detail and background that you're looking for. Another question here about size of companies entering. We don't have any preference for either big or small. Last year in the Accessibility Award, we had Microsoft and Google and Facebook all collated into one category, and it wasn't won by any of them. It was won by the 1 million volunteers of Be My Eyes. We do consider that when we're thinking about the impact of winning an award. We will consider where the impact can be greatest, but it isn't about the criteria at all. It's just about how we're sort of looking at the categories. Thinking about accessible applications, would you consider video applications or other formats as opposed to written ones in the future? We would accept a video application now, and you are able to do that. You would probably just use the questions to point to the video. We don't encourage it just at the moment, but others who we've had a link with have done some of this, and it's not necessarily the most accessible in the terms of the way that we think of accessibility. Video may or may not be useful for some people, but if you want to use video and you want to sort of build your application around a video, please do. That might be a lot easier for you. You can drop in a link to a video, and you can also use the questions and answers to say that you've answered those in the video. That would be the way to do it. A brief answer in the text box and a more full answer in the video.
Can I add a couple of bits to that?
Yeah.
So, make sure you caption it, which if you're going to put a video in, that's very, very useful. But also make sure that it works without pictures. So when you're scripting it, just produce it almost like as a piece of radio with pictures. If you need to audio describe it beyond that, that's fine. But if you think about it as I'm writing a script, I'm telling a story, and the pictures embellish it rather than you depend on the pictures, that's incredibly useful for us. So that'd be great. So a bit like the way that the news is done. You always have a reporter talking and explaining what's going on behind them and telling the story, and the pictures there add to the story rather than the sole way of displaying it.
Actually, it was Comic Relief. I was thinking about who'd use video at one point, and there were a number of videos that were impossible to understand if you couldn't see them. And so that was one of the reasons that we've always slightly shied away from it. Although we encourage people to send us videos, because often it's a really great way of sharing the story. Can you apply more than once for the same project? Yes, you can. I don't think we've ever chosen. We haven't deliberately said, well, they've already won in the past. But so you could potentially win twice, but it would have to be substantially different pieces of work. In terms of where you are in your project, it doesn't matter to us a great deal. It has to be coherent enough for us to understand what you're doing and plausible enough that you're actually going to achieve something. But as Sarah said, she didn't actually have a real robot this time last year. That was part of the process they were entering into in terms of their development. So, and we were captured by the story she was telling about the change and the potential value of the work they were doing, not so much by the shininess of the technology at that point. And it's great to know that we've helped in some way to continue to develop that story. So you can apply now, you can apply next year. You may as well apply now if you can be very clear about the impact that you're trying to have. We may well be able to support that. So.
I have to say, with the new dimension of the crowdfunder, I think even if you think you are early stage, have a go, because
yes.
if your vision is strong and you get a chance to go through to the finals, that could really help you get to the next stage. It's essentially what we were doing last year, except we didn't know it. We were piloting Mark's idea, but it was great for us. It really has helped us get to the next stage. We got the funding we needed. We built our robot. With that, we proved the concept. We then did a further crowdfunder, and we've now got the funding we need for the next year of development. So it's kind of piece by piece, step by step. But this Tech4Good Award was huge for setting us on the next stage for our journey.
John, were you going to say something? I could see a hand.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Sarah's point there. I think it's really important that organisations who have a really important project which is developing, might not be in it might still be in its early stages. You do, regardless of whether you're in the social sector or the commercial sector or the R&D sector, as an organisation, you do kind of need to have a self-advocacy strategy. Regardless of what it is you're making, if you're a bunch of artists or whatever, you still need to be able to tell your story. And I think participating in the Tech4Good Awards is a really good way of learning to tell your story. It's a good way of making sure that you've got some material which you can be ready to tell if you meet that investor in that lift and have 10 seconds to tell it. You always need to be ready if you bump into that government person who's got £1 million left at the end of the year budget. You always need to be ready. And taking part in the awards is the kind of the passageway to doing that. And yeah, seeing people coming back year after year is really interesting because we get to see how their projects have developed. So I think it's all about taking the plunge, nominating yourself, and seeing this as part of your communications, your marketing, and your advocacy strategy for your project as well.
Great.
And I'd add to that the community is really powerful, and it's not something I'd really thought about when I did the initial entry. But the alumni, as it were, previous winners, people who won the award with us at the same year, all the finalists, we got to meet them when we went to the finalist event. We got to meet them again afterwards, and it's just been the most amazing, inspirational community. The different stories, everybody's been helping each other. If there's been some great networking, if somebody knows somebody who can help you, so that has been a big part of the story, not just for us, but for a lot of the other people who we met that day.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. The questions have slowed to a halt, so I'm going to assume we've answered anything that you wanted to know. I'm just going to clarify for you that the closing date is on the 10th of May, so you've got a little over a week, nearly 2 weeks, I guess. A busy bank holiday weekend potentially. Go to the tech4goodawards.com and enter there. Anything you have any questions with, please just get in touch. There's contact details on the website. We're very happy to talk to you about what you're trying to do, and we're very happy to guide you in terms of the criteria and clarify anything that we would consider to be valuable to you. So thank you very much, Sarra, John, Gareth, for all of your help today. I think I was just reflecting on the fact that a lot of what we've talked about today is why it's good to win the awards. And I think my reflection back is that not only do we have great entries such as the Small Robot Company, but we also have great judges who really do bring a lot of rigor to what we're doing. And a lot of the credibility we get, you'll have heard today, is you're not just being given a tick box exercise. You've really got some great people who are going to read through your entry and make a sensible decision about it. So again, have a look at the judges, see who they are, think about those people reading through what you're doing and the benefits that can come from that. So thanks to everyone, and we're going to record this and share it back out with the captions. I think I've done best on the captioning. I've been scoring everybody else.